What can Paul and I do for you, Mary?
So I was just wondering about deconstruction. Since last time I called in the show, I had a commenter ask about, or I asked if I was deconstructing, and I looked it up, and I think that's what I'm doing. But like a little bit more information would help a lot.
Well, I don't know if you're deconstructing. Are you asking what if there's a definition of deconstructing, or are
Uh,
you, I mean,
like what I So the definition that I got was like essentially questioning the text, the religious text. Um, I had previously identified as Christian. I don't anymore. I don't know what I identify as at this point. I still identify as some kind of religious, and believe that there is some kind of God, but I don't know how anymore.
okay, well, hang on,
Does
Mary.
that sound like
Let's just stop there. Let's take it one point at a time. And I don't mean I'm not trying to
Mhm.
stomp on you here, but let's take it. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here until we address this at the beginning. So you're kind of religious. You think there may be something out there, but you're deconstructing, which means you're probably doubting, and you haven't really defined yourself with a marker with a proper name. I am this, I am that religiously. Is that close? Or you're just sort of seeking?
Um, Y- Yeah, yeah, something. So that sounds about right.
Okay.
Like
I'm going to back you off
I
of your
used to
phone
identify.
just a little bit. I don't know if it's a phone or a web mic. I'm going to back you off just a couple of inches because you're distorting just a little bit. Yeah, otherwise you sound great. Okay. But I'm going to move you back from your microphone just a hair for us. So, would you call yourself spiritual?
Definitely.
Okay. Can you, as best you can, in a nutshell, paint that picture? Describe what that means. Spirits, a God somewhere? Is there something? I mean, I don't know. I need to know more about where you are.
So I um had like when I was a teen, uh I was relatively skeptical, but then eventually I ended up being like, no, actually, I'm just going to go along with the religion. I don't feel like resisting anymore, and I went along with that. But then I got to a point where I was like, no, any god that would exist must be absolutely evil. And I was like, no, there's like that just doesn't make sense with my worldview anymore. But I felt like there was something missing until I spoke to people and tried to essentially find myself new evidence for, well, new spiritual evidence, like personal experiences for religion. And I did find that, and it feels like it was like divine experiences. And even if I know, like, consciously, that it's just chemicals in my brain that will fire like how I want it to, that I still, it feels very meaningful and real to me. Um,
Okay.
so
All right. Well,
that's
hang on,
kind of
Mary.
how.
Paul, did you
Mhm.
have any thoughts on where we are to this point?
No, carry on.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me like you're already ahead of the ball on this one. You realize
Mhm.
that you are having what could be described as a spiritual experience. Those moments that we have all felt as
Mhm.
human beings, whether we ascribe them or attach them to a deity or spirits or divinity or whatever, but these sort of transcendent moments of joy and connection to people, to the world around us, to our own hopes and dreams, all of these things. And language betrays us, right? We don't have the language to really frame it because it's just so amazing and overwhelming. But even you know in your description that there is brain chemistry going on. There's some cause and effect going on. None of this is proof for a god or gods anywhere, not even necessarily spirits. It sounds to me like you are having a wrestling match between your logical self and your emotional self. The mind and the body are kind of going back. I know that this is just a human thing. I know it's brain chemistry, but here it's but it feels so spiritual. Am I close?
Um, yeah, and I generally like over the past 4 years, I had been like, well, I know that it's like that, but I am going to keep my faith in the spiritual. And like over the past 4 years, most of that I did consider myself Christian because it was Christianity that kind of pulled me back in as well. But it's more recent that I was like, I don't believe Christianity like it says in the Bible like at all. So I don't think I can call myself Christian anymore.
I don't
Um,
care. I don't
and
care
so
what you call yourself.
I'm
Like
just like
I don't
yeah.
think you need to get hung up on a label at this point. I think
Hmm.
deconstruction is what? You are looking at the pieces, whether or not they fit or don't fit. You are reverse engineering your belief system to find out, is it sound? Does it hold water? Is it backed up in any way that is credible? And if that's how you frame
Hmm.
deconstruction, it's not a destination really as much as it is a journey. You are trying to approach these things honestly to find out, well, I realize something kind of magical is going on here, but what really is it? It may not be actual spirits. It may be something else, but I sure do like how I feel when those experiences happen. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think
Hmm.
you're walking the road and you've got your eyes and ears wide open. I don't know anything out, Paul. I keep pinballing to you. I just want to make sure I'm not monopolizing
No,
this
that's good.
conversation.
I do appreciate that you talked about deconstruction because if the word deconstruction is what one of the things that prompted this, Seth described it very very well. You're reverse engineering when you deconstruct a taco on the cooking show, right? They take all the various ingredients and set them out on the table, and you look at each one individually. And so if you've taken your faith apart and you said, well, look, this Bible part, all the part that's the Bible, that doesn't ring true anymore. That doesn't seem to be holding water. Yes, you should absolutely remove that ingredient from however you reconstruct yourself. And I think in all the talk about deconstruction, we don't often talk about that reconstruction part that you do have to actually put everything together and figure out what your life is. It sounds like that's the part where you're at. Some people do return to Christianity after their deconstruction, but it sounds like you're going to go at it without the Bible, without the baggage of Christianity, no matter what label you've gone to. So I encourage you to not let people in the comment section or any chat, you know, try and define what you are doing or to interfere with your journey because everyone's is different, and sometimes we only learn after the fact which label we should apply to ourselves. I never dared call myself an atheist until I discovered a channel called The Thinking Atheist, and that channel
Hmm.
allowed me to take that label upon myself because it is what I had been experiencing. But don't let the language, the vocabulary, be the cart before the horse for you. So yeah, keep going where you're going, Mary.
Uh, Thank you. Also, I do want to say to like any religious people listening that like if you truly believe in your faith, then it should be able to stand up to this test. Like so, please go for it. Like it 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 helps. It feels good.
I love.
Even if like this last step is not
Sure. I
like
mean,
easy.
a belief statement should be a statement of confidence. It should welcome all challengers.
Hmm.
And any worthy deity would say, fine, test it. I'm not worried
Mhm.
about this. It's totally sound. That's a good point, Mary. Thank you so much for calling us tonight. Be safe out there. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much too.
Uh,
Uh,
yeah.
have a
Good
great
night.
night.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Mary.
It's an interesting journey for a lot of people. I've noticed this is the case, and I want to know what you think. But so, what I see a lot of, and I've been doing this for a while. So, here's a fundamentalist, and they're right here at the bullseye, right? And I'm a Bible literalist, Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, um, Jesus was born in the manger, all that stuff. Every word of the Bible is literally true. It is inerrant and perfect. And all of a sudden you run into some stuff that's problematic and you're like, okay, well, most of the Bible's true, but some of it was, contextual or it's for yesterday. And then, but you take another step out. The Old Testament was for yesterday, the New Testament. Well, you take another step and say a lot of it is just life lessons and they're stories, right? And then, and that doesn't work. You take the next step and you're like, well, it's not a religion, it's a relationship. I don't care that much about the Bible because Jesus lives in my heart. And then maybe you take the next step where you think, well, I just think there's a God. And something made all this. And I've seen too much around me I'm just, and then maybe you take the next step and say, well, I'm not, maybe I don't believe in God, but I am spiritual. And I find this is sort of and it's a natural, I mean, it's who wants to
Sure.
jump from here all the way you know, into the Mariana Trench? It's terrifying. So what we do is we sort of gradiate our steps. But once you get to that sort of spiritual step, a lot of people get stuck there because the repercussions of the next steps are, holy shit, there may not be a God or heaven or spirits or an afterlife or any of these other things. Maybe we're all on our own. And I think a lot of people hit that membrane and the next steps are for them too difficult. And that's why they hang out in that. I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. Is there any merit to that? Or do you have maybe a different or better take on that?
Well, I mean, obviously there's merit to that approach, but I actually, in my limited time of being post-Christian, have found that it's that group of these spiritual but not religious people that end up being the most susceptible to false ideas of all kinds. Because at least when you're a fundamentalist, you have this very clear standard for yourself, and that I can talk to that kind of person and maybe justify from their scriptures or however you can point out the internal inconsistencies. But it's when you're just, oh, there must be something out there, and it's super vague. That is actually it's an equally poor epistemology as relying on old texts, but it actually allows in a lot more problematic things. It can allow in not believing science or very readily accepting pseudoscience. Like, I actually, in a weird way, there's a lot of epistemological harm that comes from that position that is avoided in the more extreme positions. So it's a frustrating one because you can't argue someone out of it because their own definition is nebulous and non thought out. So for me, I just don't find that that's the kind of person who hasn't put a lot of. Typically, it's the kind of person who hasn't put a lot of thought into it. They recognize that the major religions are false, but I don't want to think about the rest. And for me, maybe this is a little harsh, to say, but that's a little bit lazy in my view.
It may be. I see too. I'm so glad you went there because it's such a good point. I was talking to somebody, a fellow activist and psychologist, and they were talking about how a lot of the people who come out of a fundamental faith like Christianity and they end up in that sort of spiritual but not religious kind of place, they then become, as you said, easy marks for other types of wrong thinking, and they get sort of sucked into other cults. And they said that the wellness industry is a great example. A lot of the
Mm,
people who were, primed by dogmatic, fundy faiths, but are no longer, then they might get sucked into vaccines. Will give you autism, and I've got cancer, but I'm not going to go to chemo. I'm going to eat shark cartilage and eat kale and go to light therapy and shit like that. They get sucked into something else. And apparently, according to the psychologist I was speaking with, we see that a little bit more with women. And then with men, they tend to get more into like flat earth, 9/11
right.
conspiracies, the red pill culture,
Yeah.
those types of cults as well. They sort of, they, maybe it's because they have been programmed to think in those terms, but now that they're not tethered to a specific dogma, like you said, maybe their hooks get into some other damaging doctrine, dogma, or scam. So that's
coming
interesting.
to coming to accept that I don't know is a valid answer, and coming to accept that we probably don't have more life than what we have here. I just think those are harsh realities that an adult human needs to get to, right? That in order to really live an epistemologically sound life, you kind of just have, as terrible and as frustrating and as horrible as those realizations are, you kind of have to rip that band-aid off. And I felt so much better when I finally did.
But before I take these last two calls, Paul, so, okay, there is no heaven. I'm going to die. I'm not going to live forever and get the mansion and have the family dog and do all that stuff. Does death scare you?
So, I mean, I'm in this weird case where I had my cancer diagnosis immediately after I deconverted, and at one point they thought I might only have 4 weeks to live, so I had to face that much more directly than most. So now at this point, no, like death doesn't scare me. But I got to tell you, for a month of my life, for a month of my life, I was forced to stare at that very, very directly. Yeah, but now I don't. Now for me, death is it's the party's going to. is- I'm sorry that the party will go on, that I won't be part of it, but the actual non-existence doesn't bother me anymore. It's weird, but it really just, yeah, it doesn't affect me. Does it affect you? Is that something that
Well,
you
I,
fear still?
I'm so. One thing about you saying that for us for 4 weeks you thought you might be looking right at it,
Yep.
and you can then, as a human being, empathize and understand why someone who is thinking, "Oh shit, this is it," or I may
Mhm.
have the rest of my life might be involve a lot of suffering. We can understand why the idea of going to a perfect afterlife and living with
Oh, for
joy and
sure.
peace and seeing that we understand why people might gravitate to that. And I think it's important that we approach those people with kindness. They're not stupid. They're not weak. They're not all these pejoratives that we throw. A lot of times, I mean, I get pissed off at my fellow atheists because they like to wax superior at religious people.
Mm,
Sometimes they are in devastation. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think as human beings, as humanists, we have to solve human problems because as long as we see lives full of suffering and all of these questions and concerns and chaos and all of this stuff, people are going to continue to look to the skies, right? It it is just part of what people are going to do because they're afraid. And I think they deserve more than our condescension as we look down from the high mountain and fold our arms and say, oh, shit, that guy with cancer thinks he's going to die and go to heaven. Well, isn't he in for a surprise? Or actually, he won't even know it. I
right.
think we can do better than that. Um,
Agree.
to, to speak to your question, though, it's funny. I was more afraid of death when I was a Christian. And I'm not really sure why, because I really did believe in heaven. But I was scared of dying. Like, I don't want to die. Oh my God. I don't want to die.
Mhm.
And then I became an atheist and realized, well, this is my one shot. And it did two things. The first thing it did is it really ramped up the urgency of living in the moment, right? If there is no
Mhm.
tomorrow guaranteed, then this is it. Well, I better, you know, let's say the shit that needs to be said. And I don't tiptoe through your life trying to keep everybody else comfortable or happy. That's not what you need. Be true to your values, fight for which, love who you love, do what you do. And it just opened my world up. The second thing is it changed how I thought about death. It was Mark Twain, I think, who said something like, I had not existed for billions of years before now,
Right.
and I hadn't suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. And when I think about death as it's like before I was born, it doesn't bother me. Like I
Yep.
won't know I'm not here. The only part of the equation that does give me pause is the process of dying. I
Mhm.
think uselessness and suffering and burdening my family, those are the things that I think, I'm not sure I want any part. And it's one of the reasons, especially after the death of my father, and I saw him suffer quite a bit, that I became a huge proponent of medical aid in dying, death with dignity and right to die issues. People like to say, well, we're not, they're going to have euthanasia panels. And it's going to be Logan's Run. The second somebody becomes inconvenient, we're going to kill them. And I just think this is just more fear mongering. I want control as to how I leave. and I'd like to leave on my own terms while I'm still of sound body and mind and not be a burden to anybody else. And it's my life, damn it. And and that's something I would have considered almost blasphemous when I was a believer. Who are you to make those decisions about life and death? Did you feel that? Like, this is
Well,
God's decision.
no, my constant line, and I'm totally on board. My line is, and it is still my real thing. I almost said, I do not fear death. My greatest fear is being kept alive against my will. That is
Oof.
my. I fear that more than anything.
Wow.
And so I'm with you. And unfortunately, Canada is in a better spot for some of that than
As
other
of just a
places.
few
But
years ago, right? I mean, haven't you guys just passed some significant legislation
we
along those
did.
lines?
There's some significant. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but we are on our way. And of course, there's always the challenges and accusations that a doctor, conned my 90-year-old grandmother into accepting this when maybe she didn't want it. Like there's going to be
Yeah.
some bumps to go through, right? Because it is a very final decision. But if I can't make it, that's what I fear.
I joke with Natalie that, when I go, I don't want to first, I know I don't want a casket. Don't put me in a freaking hole in the ground. I don't buy
Mm-hmm.
a casket. What the hell? Right. I know I'm going to be cremated or I'm going to donate my body to science or whatever. But I told her, what I really want is when my time comes, I want to be part of the bodies exhibit. So here's what I want you to do, but
Mm.
I'm not going commando. I want shorts on. I do not want my raw junk out in front of everybody. I'm a very shy, modest person. But if you can guarantee that I can have some tennis shorts on, I want you to pose me with a tennis racket. Okay. So there I am. And
Yeah.
you just put me in the bodies, put me in the truck, and cart me from city to city so I can be useful and entertain people, ticket buyers. And then when I'm close to here, you can stop by and say hi and check on me, and I'll be there already in a waiting position. So for me, the bodies exhibit is kind of what I want
That's
to do.
your own immortality. Very good.
It's really my way of living on and giving something back.